Good evening. I hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Bava Basra Daf Kuf Lametes. Tonight we're going to be learning the Ilui Nishmas Rana Weinstock. Tonight is her Shloshim, and there will be a program that her family will be celebrating this evening, which is why I won't be able to be giving shiur in person tonight, which is why we are recording now. Yehi Ratzon that her neshama should have an aliyah. The Mishnah writes, a person passes away and he leaves over children who are above the age of bar mitzvah and below. No one's allowed to take money from the estate before it's divvied up. Everyone has to take care of themselves from their own dollars. So that means the Gedolim, they can't take money from the estate, which will reduce the chalukah of the younger children. And the reverse is also true. The children are not allowed to go buy food with the broad estate dollars. Whatever their chalukah is, that's what they have to use to feed themselves. And then they can do with their money as they see fit. Nasu hagdolim yisu aktanim. If older ones get married, younger ones can get married. A little cryptic and then contradicted by the next line. We want to get married the same way you did. Then ein shomim lahen. We don't listen to the younger children. That's only what the father says. Next part of the Mishnah speaks about a similar scenario, but where someone only left over daughters. A person left over girls who were bas mitzvah and girls who were ktanos. Same as before. We divvy up everything, and then everyone can spend their money as they see fit. Try to stay within budget, but l'maisa, we don't allow for people to take from the estate before the chalukah. It's cholkos b'shaveh. And then after that, everyone can spend their money as they see fit. Last of the short lines, Nasuk Dos Yisuktanos, same line as before. The older girls can get married, as can the young ones. We don't listen to the younger ones. Again, this is very cryptic. We don't know what it means. The Gemara will explain. Finally, the last case of the Mishnah is There is a chumrah by girls that doesn't apply to boys. Daughters are able to take food from the estate, from the Yerusha that's given to boys. We know, of course, in the pecking order that boys get the Yerusha before the girls. But one thing that's built into that is that the girls are fed from the boys' Yerusha. However, if there are only girls, then the younger girls do not get fed by the older girls. That's cholkos b'shaveh, like we saw earlier in the Mishnah. Amar Rava, we see something that seems to contradict with our Mishnah. Hi Gadol Achi, there's an older brother, and he was clothed and he was covered based on the Besa, based on the money from the estate, namely he took money before the Chalukah. So Maidu Avad, it says that if he did it, it works. He's allowed to do a b'di'evet, it seems. It says the Gemara, how can that be? That our Mishnah right here on the top of the page says that it's not allowed. You're not allowed to take stuff from the estate. So how in the world can Rava say that Hamaydu Avad in such a case it should not be allowed? So Zog the Gemara Masnisim b'sircha. What we're talking about over here is a sircha, and the Rashbam 3 lines into the wide line says Adam Batel. He's a nebach. He's a nebach, and he's not allowed to do this. Says the Gemara sircha pshita. Who cares what kind of son it is? It doesn't matter. We shouldn't say that this guy is allowed to take from the estate. We might have thought that this guy who dresses like a homeless person, he's got holes in his clothes. We might have thought that maybe we would be concerned that we don't want him to look like a menuval kamashmal, and we don't care. You're not allowed to take from the children. You're not allowed to do that. But what's mashma from here is that a regular person who isn't an adam batel, b'di'eved, is allowed. That's what is learned from the din of Rava. At the 2 dots halfway down on Kuf Lamed Tesamud Aleph Nasik Doni Suktanim, what does this cryptic Gemara mean? Michael Amar says the Gemara Amar Yehuda Hachi Kamar. This is pshat in the Mishnah, and this will explain the 2 cases of the Mishnah when it speaks about marriage. Nasuk Dolem, and here's the addition: Le'achar Misasabin. If the older child, a gadol, gets married after the father dies, Yisuktanim Nachar Misasabin, they can all take from the estate in those cases, no problem at all. If the older children got married while the father was still alive, when the Ktanim got married after the father died, and they said, we want to get married the same way you did. Tati spent $200,000 on your wedding. We now want to reduce the Yerusha by that much because of that wedding. Says whatever they have in their estate and their chalukah, that's what they can use, but they cannot reduce the total volume of the Yerusha, simply because prior to the father's death, the gadol got married at a $200,000 wedding. The katan cannot demand that after the father's death. He can only use his own chalukah. At the next two dots, two-thirds of the way down, Shalach le'avu bar Geneva l'Rava, Yilamdeinu Rabbeinu, teach us the following halacha. Love saw there's a woman who borrowed money, v'achla, she consumed it, v'amda v'nises, and then she got married. So she basically brought a debt into the marriage. Baal lokeach have o yoresh have. When the Baal, and this is really a broader shaila in Shas, that when a husband gets married, what is his relationship to the nichsei malug? We know, of course, that a woman can bring into the marriage nichsei malug. That's property that technically she owns, but the husband is allowed to benefit from the peiros. So when that's brought into the marriage, is that like he's a lokeach? Or no, it's actually more like a Yerusha because this woman's father died. The woman who loves her father died, so the money that comes in is hers. How does he relate to the Nechsei Malug? Is he a Yoresh or is he a Lokech? Do we say he's Lokech Habe Umilve Alpe Nugovim in Alakuchos? He's really a buyer. And Milve Alpe, because she had Alva, so then the people who wanted to come collect cannot come collect from the husband because he's not a Yoresh, he's a Lokech, he's a purchaser. And there's nothing you can do about that because it's a Milve Alpe. And the fact that he's a Lokech is stronger than the Milve Alpe. Oh, Dilma, do we say Yoresh Have, that in fact the person's a Yoresh? And really, because it's a Yerusha, and because she brought in a debt to the marriage, so now the husband Taka does have to be. He's not a Lokech, he's Yoresh. Which one is it? We're going to see over the next 15, 20 lines of Gemara, as we wrap up to the top side of Kuf Lamed Testament Beis, that this is not simple. And we're going to see a bunch of Shitas, Lakanu, Lakan, that maybe he's a Yoresh, maybe he is a Lokech. Answer number one, Amar Le Tanina, we saw this already, Nasuk Dolos Yitzuk Tanos. How do we understand these words? That if the Gadol got married, the Gdola got married, that the Ketana could get married. My love, Nasu Gdolos Labal. It doesn't this mean that if the older daughters, the Gdolos, got married to a man, Yisuk Tanos Mi Baal, that the Tanos can take money to get married Mi Baal from the Baal of their older sister. Namely, it's a Yerusha. Says the Gemara Lo, Nasu Gdolos Labal, Yisuk Tanos Lebal. You misunderstood. It's not what that means at all. But really, they can just take it from the estate. That's what it means, like we understood, but Pashtus and the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, is that really true? He taught exactly like the first version of this understanding of our Mishnah. That the daughters who are younger when they get married are allowed to take from the older sister's husband's money. So it looks like a Yerusha yet again. So we went from Yerusha to Lokeach to Yerusha. We don't know which one it is. It says the Gemara, Dilma Shani Parnasa, Dislekala. Perhaps it's different. Perhaps really we could say that not that the husband of the older sister is a Lokeach or a Yoresh. Maybe he's not a Yoresh at all. Maybe he's a Lokeach. But the fact that the daughters are allowed to take is because Parnasa is Lekala. Because everybody knows that the younger sister has to get fed from the older sister. She has no money, so it comes from the Baal. Could just be that he's a Lokeach, that we don't know. Isn't this what Ravin sent in his letter? After all, 6 lines from the bottom of Kuf Lamed Tes Amud Aleph. A man dies and he leaves over his widow and a daughter. 3-person family, husband, wife, daughter. The husband dies, left over is wife and daughter. So almanaso nizonas mi nechasav. Now listen, where does the Yerusha go? We know the pecking order. It's not to the wife, it goes to the daughter. So yes, the Yerusha goes to the daughter, but the almana is nizon. She gets to be fed from the Yerusha. Now let's say nisei sabas, the daughter gets married, who Yerusha goes with her, and it goes to the husband. Almanaso nizonas mi nechasav. Still, the widow is allowed to be fed from the Yerusha, even though the Yerusha went to the daughter, and now the Yerusha is really the husband's. Mesa Habas. Now, let's say the daughter dies, and the only people left in the family are the widow, the mother, and the son-in-law, because the daughter died, so it's the mother-in-law whose husband died, and the daughter who died, and now her husband. So just the two of them. So Amr Rabbi Yehuda ben Achos Shel Rabbi Yossi ben Chanina al Yodi Haya Ma'asav Amr Ramanaso Nizanas Minachasa. That we're able to see that really the food still goes back to the mother from the son-in-law. The daughter's dead. So says the Gemara over here, what does that mean? That even if the daughter dies, she still gets it. That means that there's an aspect here of Yerusha. Now, Iyamers Bishlam Yerusha Have, if you want to say that the way we look at a husband's interaction, the husband's status, I should say, with money that comes from a wife, the Nechsei Melug. So the Mishimachi Amanasin Nizanos Minachasab, then I understand why the mother-in-law is able to still be Yoresh from the son-in-law. But if in fact he's a Lokech, El Yarmas Lokech, why does that son-in-law have any he should be a mensch, but why does he have a halachic obligation to feed his ex-mother-in-law? It's not a Yerusha. It must be that it's a Yerusha. Even without Rabban, I would have already had a presumptive opinion. Why? Because bottom line of Kuf Lamed Tes Amud Aleph, we have a Mishnah. This is a Mishnah that we have not yet seen, and this is in the Choros. We'll get there in I don't know, a year or two. It says the Gemara Vatznan, Elu Hein She'ein Chozer B'Yovel. The following things are not Chozer B'Yovel. HaBechora, the Bechora never goes back to Yovel. So that's what the Rashbam says on the bottom. Chelek Bechoras HaBechor. It's considered a gift. It doesn't go back. And turning to the top of Kuf Lamed Tes Amud Beis, heading to the end of the parak, and then we will continue to learn up to the top of Kuf Mem Amud Aleph. Says the Gemara, "Hayoresh es ishto, hayoresh es ishto." That gets kept. So what we see is that it's a Yerusha. We see that a husband's relationship with the money that he receives from the wife is that it's a Yerusha, not a Lokech. Even if he sent the letter, either way, we still have sources that conflict. That in Usha they made a takani Here we see that if a woman sells her nichse malug while the husband is still alive, and then she dies, the husband can then go and collect the nichse malug, haraya that he's a lokech. So really, we've ping-ponged back and forth. Is the husband the lokech as it relates to the nichse malug of the isha? Is he a yoresh? Lokech, yoresh, lokech, yoresh. We don't know. A lot of different shitas. So then the Gemara gives a wild answer. In Lamdus, we would have to spend some time on this because it's really not normal. Says the Gemara 5 lines down on Kuf Lamed Tes Amud Beis, Amar Rav Ashi, Baal shavyuhu rabbanon ki yoresh, v'shavyu rabbanon ki lokech. Sometimes the husband is treated like a yoresh, and sometimes he's treated like a lokech. And how do we know when to employ which status? So says the Gemara, whenever it's good for him, so then that's the one that we do. So then the Gemara goes through the 3 examples we just discussed. Gabe Yovel, why did we say that he's a yoresh? Shavyu rabbanon ki yoresh mishum pseida didei. We didn't want him to have to lose out. Gabe, the case, the Rabbi Yossi Breb Chanina, where she sold the nichse malug b'chai baila shavyu rabbanon kilo kech mishum pseida didei. We didn't want him to lose everything, so it was a pseida, so we was able to do it. And gabe de Ravin, in regards to the case of Ravin, where the daughter died and only the mother-in-law and the son-in-law were alive, there we said he's like a yoresh mishum pseida de almana shavyu rabbanon ki yoresh. We didn't want the mother-in-law to have nothing, so basically we kind of finagle a little bit. We say sometimes the Baal is like a Yoresh, and sometimes the Lokech, like he's like a Lokech. Says the Gemara, even if we could understand this just on the surface level, let's assume that we do, but even if we can, V'hagabe de Rabbi Yossi Breb Chanina, but I don't understand. In the case of the Nichse Malug, where the wife sold the Nichse Malug b'chai baila, and now you want to say that he's allowed to get it back because he's a lokeach. You're right that perhaps we're able to vacillate between these 2 realities, that the Baal is a lokech and the Baal is a yoresh. But in this case, it negatively impacts the lekuchos. Your arbitrary presumption that this guy is now going to be a lokeach means he can go take the money out of your property. But if he was a Yoresh, he wouldn't. So now it's impacting other people. So says the Gemara, you're right, it's impacting other people. But the people who bought the Nichse Malug from the woman made a huge error. And the Gemara calls them out. Hasam, the purchasers who bought the Nichse Malug inhu, afsidu an afshaihu, they brought the loss upon themselves by simply buying it from a woman who's still married. That should be a reasonable purchase. This is the nichse malug that she brought to the marriage. She's not allowed to sell it. And the purchasers, should have thought that if she's going to be selling something, got to make sure that you're buying something viable. Is this nichse malug? Do you have full ownership of this? And kevan de ikabal, since there was a husband around, lo yibaylu lemizban meitza de yasva tuse gavra. They shouldn't have purchased something from a woman who was literally under a man, literally who was in a marriage. That's not the right way to do things. So that's why it's not a stira. The Gemara therefore concludes that we in fact do have a dual reality, that sometimes a lokeach, sometimes a Baal is considered a lokeach, sometimes a Baal is considered a yoresh, and depending on where the greater loss is how we will then determine which one he is. Hadron Allah Yeshnoch Baruch Hashem, we finished a difficult parak. This was the 8th parak of Maseches, Bava Basra. We are more than halfway through the Masechta, another 50 blot or so, 40 blot or so actually. And he wrote, we should come back to this daf in 7.5 years. Let's get started on the next parak, a quick piece of Mishnah and Gemara, and then we'll pause for the day. Mishemes v'hiniach banim uvanos. A man dies and left over boys and girls. Bizman shenachasim merubin. When there are a lot of properties left over, X number of dollars, we'll see how the Gemara will define merubin. Then habanim yirshu v'habanos yizonu. The boys get the Yerusha per the Psukim and Chumash, but the girls are fed from the estate. Fine. Nechasim mu'atim, but if we're below the threshold of what is called merubin, again, a measure that we'll soon see in the Gemara, but if the estate is only mu'atim, then habanos yizonu v'habanim yishu ala psachim. Then the girls get all the money, and the boys get nothing, and they have to go knocking door to door. Admon Omer, this was a Tana. Admon says, Bishvil shani zachar hifsadati. Just because I'm a zachar, I lose out. So Amar Rabban Gamliel, roa ani es divrei Admon. You're right, something is not right about this. And we don't yet know what his shita is, and we'll have to spend some time analyzing it. This part won't be today, but let's first understand the threshold of merubin and mu'atin. Says the Gemara, 10 lines from the bottom of the page on Kuf Lamed Testament base. The Kama merubin, how much is considered to be above the threshold, whereby the boys get the Yerusha and the girls are nizones from the men? Says the Gemara, it's grocery bill for 12 months. So, if your grocery bill for 12 months, let's say there's 3 boys and there's 3 girls, 6 people. Each of them need $100 of food per month. That is going to be 6 people, $600 a month times 12 months. Very good. Shmuel disagreed. He said merubin is not for 12 months of measure; it's much longer. Amar Zu Divrei Rabban Gamliel bar Rebbe. That's the shita of Rabban Gamliel, the son of Rebbe. Until they become adults. Lav dafka that it's going to be 12 months. It could be much longer. And Itmar Nami, we saw something similar. We define merubin as the amount of money that it will cost to feed these people until the time that they have matured, until the time that they are older. So let's go back, plug this back into our Mishnah. We had a variable in our Mishnah called merubin. We didn't know what it was. Merubin means when there's enough money to feed them for X amount of time. So if you read the Mishnah again, the Mishnah says if a man has children, boys and girls, when there are a lot of properties, which is defined as enough food to cover them for X amount of time until Achi Bagru, so then the boys get a classic Yerusha and the girls are fed from them. If it's less than that, then either, according to the Tanakama, the girls get everything and the boys have to go knocking. So even if it's by $1, so let's say we needed $7,000 a year for groceries for the boys and the girls, we only have 6. The girls get all the money. They divide equally. The boys get nothing. And then we saw Admon argued. So back in our Gemara, Pachos Mikan Hare Elu Muatin, bottom line of the page. But if it were to be that it was less than that amount of money, then Muatin, then the boys would get nothing. That would be the definition of Muatin. If in fact there isn't enough for that amount of time, so then the Gemara says it's not fair. Bitmiya, says the Rashba. Why would it be the case that they get everything? It's actually not how the math works. Really, Amar Rava, what does he say? They get enough money just to feed the girls. So let's say that we needed $7,000 for the 3 boys, and let's do 6 because it's easier. $6,000, $1,000 per person. Bagru, 3 boys, 3 girls, but there's only 5. So then the math works like this: had there been 6,000, the boys would have gotten a Yerusha. Now there's only 5, so the girls get up to 3 because each of them have to have enough money Achi Bagru, and then the next 2,000, the balance, that does taka go back to the boys. So let's read this again. Whatever amount of money was needed to feed the girls, they get. And the rest then go to the boys. So that would be the example where the boys would get 2,000 and the girls would get 3. We'll stop right here, and Emir Tashem will pick up tomorrow with yet another blot. Wishing you all a beautiful night.